Right now, as you watch this video, construction crews across the globe are pouring concrete for new skyscrapers, highways, and bridges. In Dubai, workers are laying the foundation for another record-breaking tower. In Singapore, engineers are expanding the coastline with massive land reclamation projects. In China, entire cities are rising from nothing in a matter of months. But there's something these projects all have in common that most people never think about. They're all consuming the world's second most used natural resource at an alarming rate. It's not oil, it's not water, it's sand. Every single concrete structure around you contains sand, the angular, rough sand that binds cement together and gives concrete its strength. Your home, your office building, the roads you drive on, the bridges you cross, they all exist because of sand. We extract 50 billion tons of sand every year, enough to build a wall 20 meters high and 20 meters wide around the entire planet. That's twice the amount produced by all the world's rivers combined. And here's the terrifying part. We're running out. The smooth, round sand from beaches and deserts can't be used for construction. Only specific types of angular sand work, and those deposits are disappearing faster than nature can replenish them. The modern construction boom began in the 1950s with the perfection of reinforced concrete technology. Suddenly, architects could build higher, faster, and stronger than ever before. Concrete became the foundation of the modern world, literally. Today's concrete technology is so advanced that engineers can create structures that were impossible just decades ago. Self-healing concrete that repairs its own cracks. Ultra-high-performance concrete that's stronger than steel. Smart concrete embedded with sensors that monitor structural health in real time. But every breakthrough in concrete technology has made our sand dependency worse, not better. Modern high-rise buildings require specific sand-to-cement ratios that demand premium-grade angular sand. Advanced concrete mixes need sand particles of precise sizes and shapes. The more sophisticated our construction becomes, the more particular we are about sand quality. And desert sand won't work. It's too smooth and round from wind erosion. Beach sand is contaminated with salt that corrodes steel reinforcement. River sand and quarried sand are the only options, and we're strip mining every accessible deposit on Earth. The technology that was supposed to build our future is consuming the very resource that makes it possible. Imagine waking up tomorrow to discover that every construction project in your city has stopped. Not because of labor strikes or economic crashes, but because there's literally no sand left to make concrete. This isn't a distant nightmare. It's already happening in specific regions around the world. In India, sand mafias control illegal mining operations because legal sand has become so scarce. In Morocco, entire beaches have been strip mined and sold to construction companies, leaving coastal communities with no natural protection against storms. The consequences cascade rapidly. Without new concrete, infrastructure maintenance becomes impossible. Roads develop potholes that can't be filled. Bridges begin to deteriorate without replacement materials. New housing construction halts, creating massive shortages that drive prices through the roof. Hospitals and schools can't be built or expanded. The entire foundation of modern civilization, literally built on sand, begins to crumble. Countries start hoarding their remaining sand deposits like strategic resources. International conflicts emerge over sand-rich territories. The global economy, built on the assumption of unlimited construction materials, faces a crisis that makes oil shortages look manageable. We've built a world that requires constant growth and expansion, but we're running out of the basic ingredient that makes growth possible. Every aspect of modern life depends on sand in ways most people never realize. The smartphone in your hand contains sand-based silicon chips. The windows in your home are made from melted sand. The glass screen you're watching this video on started as sand. But construction sand represents 85% of all sand consumption, and it's the most critical. Without it, modern civilization as we know it cannot exist. Consider Singapore, a nation that has increased its land area by 25% through land reclamation, essentially building new territory from sand imported from neighboring countries. They've consumed so much sand that Indonesia, Malaysia, and Cambodia have banned sand exports to Singapore. The city-state now sources sand from as far away as Australia at enormous cost and environmental impact. Dubai's Palm Islands required 150 million tons of sand, dredged from the seafloor and reshaping the entire coastal ecosystem. Every major city on Earth faces this same dependency. New York's concrete jungle requires constant sand imports. London's expansion depends on quarried sand from across Europe. Tokyo's earthquake-resistant buildings need specific types of sand that meet strict engineering standards. We've created a global civilization that cannot maintain itself without a resource that's becoming increasingly scarce. The irony is profound. The more successful we become at building our modern world, the faster we consume the foundation that makes it possible. Sand extraction has already passed sustainable limits in most developed regions. Rivers that once deposited sand naturally have been dammed and diverted, cutting off the supply. Coastal erosion accelerates as we remove sand faster than waves and currents can replenish it. Entire islands in Indonesia have disappeared, sold, and shipped to Singapore for construction projects. The Mekong River Delta, once a massive sand source, is now sinking because we've removed so much sediment that the land can no longer support itself. The environmental destruction is staggering. Sand mining destroys river ecosystems, eliminates fish breeding grounds, and destabilizes riverbanks. Coastal communities lose their natural protection against storms and rising sea levels. Groundwater systems collapse when sand aquifers are depleted. The very landscapes that took millions of years to form are being consumed in decades. But the economic implications are even more frightening. As sand becomes scarce, prices skyrocket. Construction costs spiral out of control. Infrastructure projects become economically unfeasible. The housing crisis deepens as building materials become luxury items. Developing nations find themselves unable to afford the basic materials needed for modernization. The global economy, built on the assumption of cheap, abundant construction materials, faces a fundamental constraint that no amount of money or technology can overcome. We're approaching a point where the cost of sand makes new construction prohibitively expensive for all but the wealthiest nations and corporations. Scientists and engineers are desperately searching for alternatives to traditional sand concrete. Recycled concrete aggregate can replace some sand, but it requires energy-intensive processing and doesn't match the performance of natural sand. Manufactured sand from crushed rock works for some applications, but it's expensive and environmentally destructive to produce. Bioconcrete using bacteria to bind materials shows promise in laboratories, but remains decades away from large-scale implementation. Some researchers are exploring radical alternatives: concrete made from recycled plastic waste, building materials grown from mushroom mycelium, or construction techniques that require no concrete at all. 3D printing technology might reduce material waste, but it still requires sand-based concrete as raw material. Bamboo and engineered wood can replace concrete in some applications, but they can't support the massive infrastructure projects that define modern civilization. The harsh reality is that none of these alternatives can replace sand at the scale and speed we currently consume it. Even if we develop perfect substitutes tomorrow, retooling the entire global construction industry would take decades. Meanwhile, sand consumption continues to accelerate. China alone uses more sand in 3 years than the United States used in the entire 20th century. The gap between consumption and sustainable alternatives is widening, not closing. We're in a race between innovation and depletion is winning. The sand crisis reveals a fundamental flaw in how we've built modern civilization. We've created a system that requires infinite growth using finite resources, and we're now approaching the limits of the most basic building material on Earth. The consequences aren't theoretical. They're already unfolding in regions where sand has become scarce. Future cities might look radically different, built with materials we haven't invented yet, or using construction techniques that minimize sand consumption. Or perhaps we'll see the end of the construction boom that has defined the last century, replaced by a focus on maintaining and repurposing existing structures rather than building new ones. The age of endless urban expansion might be ending not because we choose to stop, but because we physically cannot continue. The sand crisis forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Our modern world is more fragile than we realize, dependent on resources we've taken for granted. We've built a civilization on sand, and now we're discovering that sand itself might be the constraint that determines our future. The real question isn't if this could happen, it's whether it already has.